Our first reading comes from Psalm 15. O Lord, who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy hill? Those who walk blamelessly and do what is right and speak the truth from their heart, who do not slander with their tongue and do no evil to their friends, nor heap shame upon their neighbors, in whose eyes the wicked are despised, but who honor those who fear the Lord, who stand by their oath, even to their hurt, who do not lend money at interest, and do not take a bribe against the innocent. Those who do these things shall never be moved. Our second reading comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he began to speak and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you people, when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. This is the word of the Lord. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
Thanks be to God for you, Dwayne, for that reading. Dolly Parton gets it right every time, doesn't she? She touts inclusivity and bold love. She's a philanthropist who practically got us all vaccinated. She acts with genuine heart, and she sings from a place deep within her soul, and she's also an unabashed Christian. It was a real delight to hear that Dolly has a new song out called Don't Make Me Have to Come Down There. The title alone is a stern message, and it makes me wonder, am I more afraid of disappointing God or Dolly Parton? I'll read you just the first few lines, but you'll really have to use your imagination here. The song opens with a beautiful church chord, or chord on a church organ, and then it comes down to the sound that is always equal parts country and gospel, for which Dolly is known. And it starts like this. Last night I had a dream about God who was standing on a mountaintop, looking down around in such dismay. And in my dream I heard him say, Don't make me have to come down there. I realize that hearing me read it is no match for hearing Dolly sing it. But no matter how kind she is, I am not convinced her legal team is just as kind. And so I decided not to risk playing the copyrighted music during our worship today. But trust me, it is a great song, and it is well worth your time to go listen to it. Dolly's dream reflects so many of our visions about God and Jesus. We often picture the divine on a mountaintop, concerned about us. This vision comes to us several times throughout the Holy Scriptures, including today's, a portion of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, which starts with these Beatitudes, or blessings. In Matthew's account, Jesus is in the prime of his ministry. He has traveled the land. Jesus has healed the sick, and he has cast out demons. He has met with people whose spirits have been crushed, and he has preached in a few synagogues. He has earned a reputation. So now people have come from all over to be with Jesus, including such places as Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and from beyond the Jordan, as we would read in the passage just before today's. He hikes up the mountain, perhaps to take a breather, but also to regroup with the 4 disciples who have joined him up to this point. They have traveled the same path, and they have met the same people. They have heard the same stories and witnessed the healings. And with all of this in mind, with all of the heartache and heartbreak that Jesus has seen, he begins to preach to the disciples. He proclaims blessings upon those they've met and those who are gathered below. In the past, I have shared a story with this congregation, a little bit about some prison ministry that I have been a part of. Specifically, I have mentioned my friend Greg, who for 40 years has been on death row here in Ohio. At one time, he rejected a plea deal that would have meant life in prison instead of death row because he is that resolute about his innocence. I'll remind you that I don't know Greg's full story. My role in his life is to offer spiritual direction and counseling. Greg called me recently to share this news. His death sentence has been overturned after 4 decades. For a variety of reasons, including evidence and witness accounts that weren't ever made available to his attorneys, a judge declared he will get a new sentence. Well, Greg's new hearing was last week, and he called me to tell me all about it. The most poignant part of the entire day, he said, is when the daughter of the victim spoke, the victim of a crime committed decades earlier. She didn't claim for a moment to believe his words and claims of innocence, but with permission from the judge, she gave Greg a Bible. He said it was the truest act of someone loving their enemy. Greg recognizes that to this woman, he is and might always be, or at least might always represent, the enemy. And yet, she gave him the most precious gift he could ever imagine. He told me he feels deep compassion for this woman who lost her mom all those years ago. He sees her cry, and he said he understands her pain, for he too has lost loved ones. He speaks with genuine tenderness when he acknowledges the ache that she must feel for the lack of closure, still not knowing what truly happened. I can't help but think that somewhere in her own heart, the daughter of the victim also feels for Greg. Gifting him the Bible was an extraordinary act of love. Greg also tells me that even though he still stands convicted for a crime he says he did not commit, he forgives those who accuse him. He said, and I quote, "Some people made up their mind about me a long time ago, and they will always call me criminal. But Jesus calls me blessed, and that is how I can forgive." Despite the horrible circumstances, there seems to have been great empathy in that courtroom that day. Empathy. It is the core of the Beatitudes. Yes, Jesus was reflecting upon all the people that he had met up until that point, including people from his travels and the crowd gathered at the foot of the hill. But here's the thing about the Beatitudes. These blessings are actually a reflection of the preacher himself. Think about it. And hear this again. Who knows how it feels to be poor in spirit and to mourn better than the one who has just spent mile after mile bearing witness to people in pain? Who opposed violence and embodied humility in a way that might also be known as gentle, or in this translation, meek? Who is it who hungered and thirsted and eventually suffered persecution for the sake of righteousness? Who showed mercy to everyone he encountered? Who came to be the ultimate peacemaker, becoming known as the Prince of Peace? Who was reviled and heard utterances of evil against him in the name of all that is holy? In these 9 blessings, Jesus describes all that his closest followers have in common with him. This is what it looks like to be a disciple. The blessings point to the nature of the crowd and also point back to the essence of the preacher himself. Jesus the Christ. Reverend Donald McCullough summed it up beautifully in a piece that he wrote for Christianity Today more than 2 decades ago. Reflecting on this same scripture and the people Jesus blessed, he wrote, "They cannot live under God's authority in a sinful world without mourning. As their hearts begin to beat in rhythm with God's heart, their hearts begin to break over the things that break God's heart." Yes, the Beatitudes speak to the heart of the holy. Jesus blesses the people whose hearts beat in rhythm with God's. In his sermon, Jesus hoped to give a lens through which Jesus hoped to give a lens through which we could see the world the way that he did and feel the way that he felt. Sanctified empathy. As I listen to the news each day, I've started to think, Dolly Parton might be right. Perhaps God is yelling, "Don't make me have to come down there." Because I can imagine that God's heart continues to break for the cruelties we endure and the cruelties we inflict, just as Jesus' heart broke when he saw them in the flesh. Over the weekend, as Pastor Zigrid pointed out during Joys and Concerns, new details emerged about the police encounter with a 29-year-old Tyree Nichols, a black man who lost his life after a traffic stop turned violent in Memphis, Tennessee. We weep again, and Jesus must also. We've learned about the incident, but let us also learn about Tyree Nichols. He was a person before he was a news story. Tyree Nichols was a father of a young son. His friends describe him as having a quick wit and genuine warmth and a love for all people. Tyree was an aspiring photographer, and on his photography blog, he shared about his passion, and it has gone viral, so some of you may have already read this. He wrote, in part, "My vision is to bring my viewers deep into what I am seeing through my eye and out through my lens." He also includes, "I hope to one day let people see what I see and to hopefully admire my work based on the quality and ideals of my work." Tyree, too, saw beauty and pain in the world, and he hoped that through his lens he might help others to see what he saw and to feel what he felt. In the weeks since his passing, the courtroom has been filled with people who are poor in spirit and those who mourn over the loss of this beautiful man. The streets are filled now with activists, people who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for a just and accountable system that protects all people. Homes and offices are filled once again with organizers who seek to create change and to become peacemakers. I believe that for Jesus, the courtroom, the streets, the houses and offices are the foot of that mountain. He finds us in all of those places. His congregation of grief-stricken, wounded, angry, sick, and tired, hurting people who feel the collective pain of this and every injustice. And it is because we feel this sanctified empathy that Jesus looks at us and says, "My heart breaks with yours. Blessed are you." Where is the hope in the heartbreak? Well, when we feel the way Jesus feels about the world, then we are reminded that we are called to respond the way Jesus responds. Jesus mourned over circumstances and systems that kept people down, and he also worked to make them right. Jesus was gentle, but he held people to account. And with all due respect for Dolly, I think I may have changed my mind. God doesn't have to come down here. God is already here. The hope is in us and in the Christ whose love and blessings we reflect to the world. It starts here at the bottom of the mountain, which just happens to look a lot like this sanctuary. May we go into the world ready first to show empathy and then to make change. Amen.